the studio with us by phone, Bishop Larry Kulick of the Catholic Diocese of Greensburg, joining us on the line this morning. Our visit presented by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. You can visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Bishop Kulick, good morning.
Good morning.
It is wonderful to have you with us here this morning, and I know it's a very, very busy time for you and folks within the diocese. There's actually a Mass scheduled later this morning, correct?
Yes, we're going to have a Mass for His Holiness at 11:45 at Blessed Sacrament Cathedral in Greensburg.
All right, so that will be happening, and I'm sure there are plans throughout the diocese for marking what is always a memorable occasion, but especially on this day, we look back at the legacy of Pope Francis, and it is an amazing journey that he has taken and brought with him the Diocese of Greensburg along with the entire Catholic Church. The reflections that we'll be hearing in the next several days and weeks are really going to help us to focus upon a remarkable man.
Certainly, and certainly a historic figure in the life of our Catholic Church, and truly a time when, like any family, we mourn the loss of a loved one, we mourn the loss of our spiritual father, and then with the ancient tradition and rites of the Church, we not only commend him to the Lord with the funeral rites, but then there will be a whole period of time of mourning and also then preparation for the conclave, which will result ultimately in the election of his successor, the next pope.
As we look back at when he became pope, the circumstances of that really were unprecedented, weren't they?
They really were. For several hundred years, there had never been a pope that resigned from the office. And Pope Benedict XVI, of course, submitted his resignation and felt that he needed to step aside from the office, and that was quite historical, and I think took many of us in the church and outside by surprise.
And Pope Francis was the first of the popes to be named from the Americas. Did that have an influence on the churches of the Americas more so than had it been an Italian or someone from a European country?
I think certainly so. You know, one of the things that was the hallmark of Pope Francis was that at the heart he was a pastor. And his teachings, many of his writings, his administration, but also just his everyday interaction with people was based on that pastoral sense of centering himself on Christ and modeling that love, that humility, and that charity of Christ. And I think that really came from his experiences in Argentina and certainly working in the Americas in areas where there was a lot of poverty, and he witnessed that poverty. And, you know, one of the hallmarks of Pope Francis is he reminded us always to remember the poor and how the poor were at the heart of the church, thus even, I think, taking his name, Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, who we know modeled that poverty after his own interior conversion and founded his religious community really on the heart of that same sense of values of charity, fraternity, humility.
You have spoken very movingly of when you were in the Vatican and in the presence of the Pope. Did that change you personally, or did it deepen your understanding of what it is that happens within not only the Catholic hierarchy, but within the Church and the leadership that is necessary from someone in that position?
Sure, I think it really did. What I've been reflecting upon, a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity with many new bishops to be at an orientation program that was offered in Rome. And really, at the end of that 9 to 10-day orientation, we had an opportunity to meet personally with the Holy Father. He met with us as a group, and then we each had the opportunity to have a little bit of time with him personally. And what really moved me was, as he came in to the Clementine Hall and was greeting us, he said to us, I'm so delighted to have all of you here as shepherds of your respective churches, dioceses. And he said, I want to listen to you. I want to hear you. He said, I want you to feel free to tell me what you might think, to offer some suggestions, and he said even some criticisms if you'd like. And then he sort of smiled, and with a twinkle in his eye, he said, "Of course, all with charity." And we all sort of laughed. But I think how that influenced me is, here is the head of the Catholic Church, the Bishop of Rome, the successor of St. Peter, and reminding us and modeling for us as bishops how we need to listen. So I think that's very important in his stress on synodality of listening to people, hearing them. And I think that's so important in administration and in spiritual care even more, that you listen so that you know where people are coming from, what their experiences are. That doesn't always mean that you necessarily agree or can agree with them from the Church's point of view on faith and morals, but you listen to them, and I think that allows you then to pastorally respond. And as the word that our Holy Father used so often, sort of like the key phrase of his time as bishop, to accompany. We're called to accompany each other, whether we're a bishop, a priest, a religious, or the faithful through our baptism. We accompany people on their journey and walk with them.
One can easily see then that would influence anyone on any level, but certainly someone who's in a leadership role such as you are, as the bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Greensburg. It must be very, very powerful.
It is. And when we think about the Holy Spirit being present, the Holy Spirit is present in that quiet listening, in that hush, and so it's been very formative to me, and I've tried to the best of my ability. I'm sure sometimes in a less than perfect way, but have tried to model that myself, because I know that's what the Holy Father would want. He wants his priests and he wants his bishops to be at heart. He wanted them to be shepherds and pastors.
Pope Francis was never shy and never afraid to maybe fly a little bit in the face of tradition if he did not feel that that tradition merited a continuation. Some of the stances that he took on public matters were a bit controversial, and he even got some pushback on some of them. How heartening is it that someone would, in that sort of a role, not be a slave to what has happened in the past, but really look for a way to chart a path forward?
Well, I think that was probably one of the hallmarks of his papacy. And I think sometimes, especially how things were reported or how they were so many times interpreted, would always go in one bent or another. But I think when you look at it, Pope Francis was very faithful to the Scriptures and to the Church's magisterium. But what he wanted to do is he wanted to allow an environment to be present so that one could speak, one could have discussion, and one could actually delve into issues. And I think that what he was really trying to do was set a healthy environment that took into consideration so many of the cultures of the universal church and the particular situations and pastoral needs. But at times too, I think you saw the Holy Father, really upholding the substantive teachings of the church. It was more, I would say, it was more in a style of wanting to listen and wanting to really hear people. Because I think when you hear people, I so often say, when you hear people and listen to people, you can understand where they're coming from and understand not only where they have been, but also where they need to go. And sometimes listening also helps you to understand how best to fulfill your role as teacher and what needs to be taught, and more importantly, how it needs to be taught. I think that's the thing. That's really the key of Pope Francis. It was, so to speak, the pedagogy. How do we teach? How do we let people have a personal encounter with Christ, to have a conversion of heart, not just an intellectual knowledge of the faith, but a conversion of the heart?
Bishop Larry Kulick with us, and a very busy man, of course, much to do in Greensburg today, and I appreciate your joining us. Just a couple of more questions if you have the time. When people think of papal legacy, especially in this day and age, they think of John Paul II and what a mountain of wonder that he was able to accomplish in his time as Pope. And sometimes you can be a little bit intimidated by that. Pope Francis will forge his own legacy, and we'll have our own memories of him. but they are certainly monumental, the things that he did as Pope, and people will remember this for a long time.
Oh, absolutely. I think part of the genius, as I've said, of what we believe as Catholics and what we refer to as apostolic succession, which means the bishops are the successors to the apostles in an unbroken line of succession, and the popes are the successors of St. Peter. Really, the genius of apostolic succession is that through the power of the Holy Spirit, which will happen in this conclave, individuals are given to the Church as a gift, and they each bring their own talents, their own gifts, their own strengths, and their own models of holiness to a particular moment in time in which the Church and society exists. And they're called to bring those gifts at that moment. And just as you said, you look at the legacy of John Paul II, and you think about communism. You think about his background and understanding of relativism in the moral sphere, and the fierce defender of human life in a time when technologies were starting to manipulate all elements of human life and even conception, and how he brought that intellectual, spiritual, and also strong fortitude. The same is true with Francis, bringing that pastoral approach to a time when people need listened to. And I think we each build upon that ongoing foundation. And so I think that's really what the gift of the Holy Spirit will bring in the next conclave. We build upon our predecessors, whether it's as a pastor, whether it's as a bishop, or whether it's as the Pope.
We know that there will be much to learn from the Catholic Diocese of Greensburg over the next several weeks about how the Pope will be honored. In terms of the process itself, what role will our diocese play, if any, in the mourning process or the transition to a new Pope?
Sure. Well, our position here and our main purpose as a diocesan church is we will be, what I would like to say, hopefully a powerhouse of prayer. Over the next several days, we will be joining with the church throughout the world in mourning the death of the Holy Father, but even beginning today, we will be offering masses for the repose of his soul, and we will be, along with the Universal Church, participating in that funeral rite and in the prayers for the dead. And then we'll transition, as will the Universal Church, into that time where there will be discernment. And the College of Cardinals will meet first informally, and then formally, and ultimately it will begin the conclave. And our prayers will then move for prayers of the Holy Spirit to guide the college. And then, with the election of the new Pope, we will be there, both offering masses and prayers and support for the new Holy Father. So I guess to sort of phrase Pope Francis, we as a diocese, along with dioceses all around the world, will be accompanying each other and accompanying the Church through this both a traditional and historic moment.
I do so appreciate your taking time to visit with us here in Indiana this morning. I'm sure that we'll hear much, much more from you and from others within the diocese, and you're a very, very busy man, so thank you so much.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity, and I just ask the faithful to keep the Holy Father in their prayers and the Church at this time. And thank you for your wonderful support, and to especially this wonderful part of the Diocese of Greensburg, Indiana County, and beyond. Thank you.
Bishop Larry Kulick, have a wonderful day today. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is Bishop Larry Kulick of the Catholic Diocese of Greensburg joining us here this morning on Indiana in the Morning at 10:16. We'll get to the Brian Kilmeade Show in just a moment or so, but we want to thank him again. You heard from him about the Mass schedule and how that is still under development, the Mass that will be held this morning at the church in Greensburg, and then much more will be released in terms of where the diocese goes from here. It is Indiana in the Morning, an extended edition here this morning on WCCS, 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com.